Here is an image that I've already edited in Adobe Camera Raw, opened into Photoshop, and as you can see, it's a work in progress that requires some text. That requires me to work in layers. We'll be looking at layers at some stage. You can see them on the right hand side. This sort of image I would always save as a Photoshop file. It's a work in progress. Let's assume I have done some work on it. I want to walk away from my computer, but I need to save this. Saving this as a Photoshop file which retains both of those layers. So if I go to File, Save, you'll notice that the Save As dialog window opens. It does this because this image hasn't been saved before. So the software doesn't really recognize it as a Photoshop document, although it knows it's a Photoshop document because it's currently in 2 layers. So it's picked up Save As type as Photoshop, and of course it gives us the file name. All I'm going to do here is click to save it. Now, as you can see by the changes I've input here, I've cropped the image a little, and that needed the text to be moved slightly so it's in a nicer position to be able to be read. Now, what would I save this as if I wanted to continue as a work in progress? Because if I went to File, and I'm going to do this to show you what happens, if I click Save, it's saved instantly over the previous version. So now we've lost our ability to go back to the previous version. Now that's okay if you know that's going to happen, but of course it may have been a better thing to do that when I got to this copy to go to File, Save As, and I could have saved this with perhaps something which tells me that this has been edited. Because in that scenario, I would now have 2 copies. I would have my original, and then I would have my cropped version with the text move. Both of them would be retained as layers as a Photoshop file. Now, as you can see here, I've made another change. I've just simply changed the color of the text. But what I'd like to do now is to save this as a JPEG for use in whatever project you may have in mind. So let's go to the file. This time we want Save As, and here I would be going down to the Save As type and selecting JPEG, and I would be saving it at whatever quality I felt appropriate, and here I think I'll stay with quality 12. But here's something which may throw you the first time it happens. I could say to myself, well, I'm finished here now, I'm going to close this down. But when I go to close it down, we get a dialog which says, do you want to save it? Well, we have just saved it. Well, in actual fact, we haven't saved the Photoshop file. We've saved a JPEG version of it, but we haven't saved the Photoshop file. So if I say no to this now, and I reopen it from my File, Open Recent, we're going to see the text is back to white. So for my work in progress, particularly if I'm working in layers, I'll always save my images as Photoshop files. But just be aware that at any time, if you edit your Photoshop file and then save it as a JPEG, don't be thrown when you go to close down the image to find that Photoshop also is asking you if you want to save it as a Photoshop file. To be honest, 9 times out of 10, probably a good idea to actually save it. Now, a very good routine to get into is when you're working with an image which is going to be a work in progress. It's a very good idea to save your original file. But every time you make a significant edit to that file, save it with a slightly different name. Add a number to the end of the file name, or edit 1, edit 2. Now, as you become more experienced in Photoshop, you'll need those less and less. But in the earlier days, they can be very valuable. Now, as you can see by the change on screen, I've opened up another image. There's no significance in me opening up different images, but it does give you something different to look at. Here we have an image that's been worked on in Adobe Camera Raw, but I'm happy with it. I've opened it up into Photoshop, so now I want to save it as a completed finished image. Now I save my finished images separately to my original raw images. In fact, they're on a different hard drive entirely. I save all my JPEGs at a level of compression of 12. So here with a finished image, I'm going to go to File. We can go to Save As or Save as a Copy. I go to Save As. Just for the benefit of this particular video, I'm going to put it in the same place, but as I said a moment ago, normally this would be on a separate drive. I would select the save type, JPEG, and save this at quality 12. Then I'm happy to close this down, and I know that I've got both the original raw file that I can pick up on if needs be, but I've got the final JPEG ready for any project I need it for. Now here's another image that's been edited in Camera Raw and opened up into Photoshop, ready for saving as a JPEG. You will find as you speak to people that there are a lot of opinions about saving JPEGs. At some stage, newer users of Photoshop will have to make up their own mind. But there's also a lot of myths about a loss of quality with JPEGs. Now I'm pretty keen on image quality. It's what drives me most of the time. So there's no way I'm going to save my final images as JPEGs if in doing so they lose any of the qualities that I've fought hard to achieve. Now if I create an image at a lower resolution, maybe for a Camera Club competition, I'll do exactly the same, save this as a JPEG, but sometimes you may find you have to change the compression setting from 12 to maybe 10 or even 8 to enable you to meet the club's megabyte size rules. Many clubs have these rules, and even though you resize the image, it may be just a little too large. Just reducing that compression setting is enough. Now I don't think we need to know any more at this stage. Apart maybe from saving some images as a PNG file or a WebP file. Now these options are sometimes necessary when we have a subject floating on a transparent background. This is a subject we'll cover sometime later, but here we can see the effect of that. I have a car that's been cut out from its background, and the blue and white checkerboard is actually transparent. So I can move the car anywhere, but if I wanted to save this, I would need to retain the transparent nature of the background. Saving this as a Photoshop file would do that, but if I wanted to use this in a video or something, I may want to save it as either a PNG or a WebP file. Now let me just quickly run you through that to finish. File, Save As. I'll call this Red Car. I need to change the Save As type to either PNG or down the bottom WebP. Let's choose the PNG. Click Save. Medium file size always suits everything I want to do. I click OK to that. There we have it. You may find it takes a little while to save, but it will save perfectly okay. This is a high resolution file and your transparent background will be retained. Now we could go into the pros and cons of many save formats, but I suspect that if we did that, both you and I may lose the will to live. As your experience of Photoshop builds up, this topic will become much easier. If and when you require a different save format in the future, there's a good bet you'll understand why. Remember that every time we open up a picture that we've edited through Adobe Camera Raw, as we open it into Photoshop, all of the changes we've made will be saved in that raw file. I'll see you in the next video.